Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and roll your notifications to all so you don't miss any of the demonic content. In our last video, we discussed the idea of dominionism, or dominion theology, and see Peter Wagner's formulation of it in Dominion, How Kingdom Action Can Change the World. In the second part of Dominions and Demons, we're going to be looking at some of the problematic elements of Wagner's work. While there are several positions that Wagner's work could be critiqued upon, I will focus on two: the Machiavellian methods which Wagner espouses to dominate politics, and his reliance on controversial figure R.J. Rushdoony. In his 8th chapter, entitled A New Strategy, Wagner points out in the first section, quote, "The first step toward determining a strategy is to set a viable goal. The goal, of course, is what counts. The strategy is only a means to accomplish the end. I mention this because somehow a large number of people have become programmed with the ridiculous notion that the end doesn't justify the means. It does not require much hard thinking to realize that nothing can possibly justify the means except the end." If the phrase "the end justifies the means" rings a bell, that's because it's based on the philosophy of Niccolo Machiavelli from his famous work, The Prince, a book which invites rulers to use deception, manipulation, and fear to achieve their goals. Now, here we need to think of authorial intention. Why would you, unprompted, invite your audience to think about Machiavelli and all the tactics of control espoused in The Prince? Now, we could come up with some initial hypotheses. Maybe Wagner's just foolish. That doesn't seem to hold water given his education, small library of publications, and influence. Maybe he just doesn't really know what he's saying. Say to yourself, "The end justifies the means," in whatever voice comes naturally to you. Did that sound a little ominous? What kinds of images did it conjure up? The likelihood is that this must have been a very specific choice, one that made it through several rounds of revision. And it seems to me that the likeliest reason that you're leaving in a reference to The Prince is because you're about to tell your audience, overtly or covertly, that Machiavellian tactics are acceptable. Wagner doesn't disappoint. Mere sentences later, he claims, quote, "Some will respond that we cannot use immoral means to accomplish a given end, even though it might be a moral end. This is true. Let's agree that we must be ethical in everything we do. Having agreed on that up front, I suggest that we now move out of the realm of ethics and into the realm of practical strategy." Every time I read this paragraph, I still can't quite wrap my head around it. It's almost like he's shouting, "Look over there!" in an attempt to distract somebody while he steals their candy. What Wagner's really saying is, okay, some of you might have been put off when I invoked Machiavelli in the last paragraph, and I get it. But don't worry. All we really have to do is agree to be ethical, and everything's going to be okay. Presumably, we don't need to discuss why it could be disastrous to suggest to a population that believes the majority of the world is governed by demons that they just need to follow their own reason and moral compass, and everything's going to turn out okay. And then it gets worse. In the very next paragraph, Wagner goes on to say, "We naturally choose the strategy that will best accomplish the goal." Another way of saying this is, do whatever it takes. Let's return again to the ideas behind The Prince. While Machiavelli doesn't use the phrase, "do whatever it takes," this is a kind of simple summation of his philosophy in The Prince, an invitation to pragmatism over virtue and morality. Wagner then goes on to poo-poo concerns over favoring pragmatic solutions over virtuous ones or moral ones, saying, quote, "Pious phrases like, 'What really matters is who I am, not what I do,' or 'the process is more important than the outcome,' or 'God knows that my heart is right,' are geared towards opening the door for comfortably rationalizing lack of success in a given project." End quote. To be clear, Wagner is condemning those phrases. Here, results are what matter, not staying true to yourself or your ethical core. You might be inclined to say, well, but Wagner's a Christian, right? I mean, surely the project he's endorsing can't be that bad, right? Oh, it's bad. As Wagner points out, quote, the practical theology that best builds a foundation under social transformation is dominion theology, end quote. This theology, according to Wagner, can be traced from John Calvin to Abraham Kuyper to R.J. Rushdoony. Each of these three figures has a purpose for Wagner. Wagner connects Calvin and Luther together early in the work in an attempt to sort of solidify the former's Protestant authority. That is, Wagner wants his readers to view Calvin as co-equal with Luther, as, quote, the two most outstanding leaders of the Reformation, end quote. Why does he want to do that? Because the next individual, Abraham Kuyper, is a Calvinist, and Wagner wants to use Kuyper to highlight the notion that dominionist theologies can work. You see, not only was Kuyper a pastor, he was also the prime minister of the Netherlands at the turn of the 20th century. And many of the social transformations, to use Wagner's terms, that occurred under his watch realigned the government with the Reformed Calvinist Church. The fact that he also espoused an anti-modernist stance, basically arguing that the truth of the church was primary over everything else, was likely icing on the cake for Wagner. Yet it is perhaps Wagner's invocation of Rushdoony that is the most problematic. First, a bit on Rushdoony for those who don't know him. Rousas J. Rushdoony was a Reformed theologian who wrote the 3-volume work, The Institutes of Biblical Law, in response to what he saw as the lawlessness of the sexual revolution of the late 60s. In the work, Rushdoony provides an outline for what a Christian theocracy, that is, ruled by Christian laws, would look like. More or less, Rushdoony is articulating what a legal system would appear to be if everyone followed his interpretation of the 10 Commandments. I think just one of the anecdotes about Rushdoony from Michael McVicker's book, Christian Reconstruction, R.J. Rushdoony and American Religious Conservatism, will suffice to explain why he is a controversial figure. Quote, on a Sunday afternoon in 1976, during one of these intimate low-key meetings at the Westwood Chapel, a member from the Light and Power House quizzed Rushdoony on his theonomic vision. Ever the doting grandfatherly patriarch, Rushdoony fielded the questions while holding 2 young children on his lap. The Light and Powerhouse student wondered, what would happen to a Hindu in a reconstructed America? As long as he didn't practice his faith, the Hindu would be fine, Rushdoony responded as he absent-mindedly bounced the children on his knee. And what if said Hindu did practice his faith? Then he'd be guilty of violating the laws of the state. And, still fawning over the tots, Rushdoony concluded he would be subject to capital punishment. Silence. The meeting broke up soon afterwards. As it turns out, capital punishment is a frequent element of Rushdoony's law, and it is to be used to remedy everything from disobedient children to homosexuality to witches. This is the blueprint for dominion theology, which Wagner is recommending to his audience. Perhaps it's becoming clear why Wagner chose to invoke Machiavellian ideas in his work. To be fair, Wagner only used Rushdoony's name once over the course of Dominion, yet this single invocation is itself perplexing. Like the ideas behind Machiavelli's work, Rushdoony's name is better left unspoken than said when someone wants to make their point. Wagner's single use is meant to tantalize the audience, to encourage them to look for more information, while at the same time insulating himself from criticism. It is a common technique in the New Apostolic Reformation, whose theologians make use of Rushdoony both in an overt and covert manner. For instance, as John Weaver writes in his book, The New Apostolic Reformation, History of a Modern Charismatic Movement, quote, Cindy Jacobs used Rousas Rushdoony's Institutes of Biblical Law as one of her prime research tools for her work, The Reformation Manifesto, another dominionist-inflected work within the group's repository. So how did Wagner's readers take this invitation to do whatever it takes, to use Machiavellian tactics? to accomplish their goals. If Dominion was written in 2008, what happened between now and then to start the march of Dominion theology across the United States? How much progress have its proponents made? We'll cover that in part 3.